What if the key to influence isn't force, but empathy? What if negotiation, whether in a boardroom or at your kitchen table, isn't about arguing your way to a win, but listening your way to clarity? In Never Split the Difference, former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss pulls back the curtain on how real power moves quietly. This video isn't a summary. It's a reframing, a lens for those of us trying to lead, decide, and communicate in a world that often mistakes volume for value. At Poetics of Success, we don't just summarize books. We dive into how profound ideas can transform the way you lead, negotiate, and influence, helping you become a braver, more authentic leader who moves with both strength and subtlety. Subscribe for more powerful insights on how to master the art of negotiation, build genuine connections, and lead with empathy and confidence. Chris Voss is a former FBI hostage negotiator who spent over 24 years working on some of the most dangerous cases in the world. He started out as a police officer in Kansas City, Missouri. After joining the FBI, he worked his way into the crisis negotiation unit. He was often called in when lives were at risk, hostage situations, kidnappings, or international standoffs. Over time, he became the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. After retiring from the FBI, he used his real-life negotiation experience to train business leaders, lawyers, and everyday people on how to handle difficult conversations. He later founded a consulting company called the Black Swan Group. Never Split the Difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it is a book that Chris Voss wrote with journalist Tal Raz. The book tells stories from Voss's time in the FBI and shows how those high-pressure situations can teach us something about everyday negotiations, like asking for a raise, buying a car, or dealing with conflict at work. Each chapter of the book is based on real events. For example, Voss shares how he handled a bank robbery with hostages in Brooklyn, and how small changes in how he spoke made a big difference. The book includes short exercises, examples, and dialogue to help readers understand what's going on in each situation. It's part storytelling and part how-to, but always written in a simple and clear way. During the writing process, Voss wanted the book to feel useful, not academic. He worked with Tal Raz to make sure the tone stayed practical and relatable. They included case studies from people who had learned his methods and used them in everyday life, like negotiating rent or winning a job interview. Let's begin with one of the most powerful tools in Chris Voss's negotiation playbook: tactical empathy. Now, when we hear the word empathy, we might think of kindness or emotional support. But tactical empathy is something different. It's not about agreeing with someone or feeling sorry for them. It's about stepping into their shoes, seeing the world through their eyes, and making sure they know that you understand what they're feeling, without judgment. Chris Voss says this is the first move in any negotiation. Before you try to convince someone, before you push your idea or ask for what you want, you first have to listen deeply, not just to their words, but to their tone, their hesitations, their frustrations. Tactical empathy, he writes, is understanding the feelings and mindset of another in the moment. In one unforgettable story from the book, Voss is called into a tense hostage situation. A bank robber in Brooklyn is holding several people inside. Everyone's nervous. There are lives at risk. Now you might think the first step is to demand the robber surrender. But Voss doesn't do that. Instead, he starts listening. He pays close attention to what the robber is saying and what he's not saying. He notices the fear underneath the anger, the pressure behind the robber's words. And then, instead of arguing or offering a deal, Voss starts using a skill called labeling. He says things like, "It sounds like you're worried this won't end well. It seems like you feel stuck. It looks like you don't trust what's happening on the outside." These simple phrases may not seem powerful, but they're doing something very important. They are naming the emotions in the room. That's exactly what happened. The robber slowly became more open. The conversation became less about threats and more about resolution. Now, you might not be dealing with bank robbers, but if you lead a team, work with clients, or manage people in any way, this idea of tactical empathy can totally change how you lead. Voss also teaches a technique called mirroring, where you repeat the last few words the other person said using a gentle, questioning tone. If someone says, "I just feel like nobody's listening," you can say back, "Nobody's listening?" In business, people often think being in control means talking more, explaining more, showing you're the smartest in the room. But Voss flips that idea. He says that real control starts with listening. It starts with making the other person feel safe and understood. Fairness feels like a principle everyone agrees on. But in this chapter, Chris Voss pulls back the curtain and shows how fair is often used not as a standard, but as a tactic, a move in the game, sometimes even a trap. Voss believes that people use the word fair to control the conversation emotionally. When someone says, "I just want what's fair," it sounds reasonable. But what they often mean is, "Give me what I want, or I'll make you feel guilty." In other words, fair can stop a negotiation cold because it pulls in emotion, shame, and pressure without actually solving anything. One of the most striking examples comes from Voss's time working with a colleague who had just started a negotiation with a client. Not long into the conversation, the client suddenly said, "I've got to say, I've always treated you fairly." Now, that may sound like a compliment, but Voss teaches us to read between the lines. This wasn't about fairness. It was a subtle warning. Don't push back. Don't ask for more. Don't make me feel bad. But Voss doesn't fall for it. He teaches his students and readers how to stay calm and call it out gently. He might respond by saying something like, "I'm sorry. Can you explain what you mean by fair?" This shifts the conversation away from guilt and back toward clarity. So, what does this mean for leaders, managers, or anyone working with teams? In most workplaces, people won't say, "You're wrong." Instead, they'll say, "That's not fair." It often hides a deeper issue. Someone doesn't feel heard, or they're trying to hold power without being direct. If you're managing people, you've probably heard things like, "Why does she get to lead that project? That's not fair. I've been here longer. It's only fair that I get the promotion." These kinds of questions take the heat out of the conversation. You're not rejecting their feelings, but you're not surrendering to guilt either. Most of us have been taught that hearing no is a bad thing. Whether it's in sales, business meetings, or even everyday conversations, we're often trained to chase the yes. Chris Voss flips that idea on its head. He says, no is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of trust. Voss believes that pushing for a yes too quickly can actually backfire. People feel cornered when they are nudged toward agreement too early. But when someone says no, they feel safe. They feel in control. There's a great story in the book about a business deal that was going nowhere. The company Chris was helping had been emailing a client over and over, but the client kept ghosting them. No reply. So Voss told them to send one more email, and this time it started with a simple sentence. "Have you given up on this project?" That's it. That's all it said. And guess what? The client wrote back almost immediately. Why? Because it gave them a chance to say no, without being attacked, judged, or pressured. That no was a way to re-enter the conversation. If you're in a leadership role or work with teams, this chapter is pure gold. Think about the last time you pitched a new idea to your team. You probably asked, "Do you agree?" or "Can we move forward with this?" But what if your team said yes just to avoid conflict, or worse, because they felt pressured? That yes might not be real. Voss suggests changing how you frame your questions. Instead of asking, "Is this plan okay with everyone?" try asking, "Would it be a bad idea to try this for a week?" These questions invite a no, and when people are free to say no, they relax, they trust you more, and ironically, they often become more open to change because they don't feel pushed. Chris Voss introduces a brilliant technique he calls the accusation audit. Before someone can accuse you, blame you, or even think something bad about your offer, you say it first. Out loud. Voss believes that people enter negotiations with fear, doubt, and resistance. They're already bracing themselves to be disappointed, tricked, or forced into something they don't want. So, rather than pretending everything is fine or hoping those emotions won't come up, Voss says, call them out early. Name the negatives. Say what they might be thinking before they do. It sounds risky, but it actually builds tremendous trust. In one story, Voss was negotiating the release of a hostage. The family had no money. The kidnapper didn't trust the FBI. Tension was high. So what did Voss do? Before launching into any pitch, he opened the conversation with an accusation audit. He said things like, "You probably think I'm just another government agent who's here to waste your time. You may believe I don't care what happens to you." The kidnapper couldn't use those accusations against him anymore, because Voss had already taken ownership of them. And this wasn't about apologizing. It was about acknowledging reality. Now let's apply this to the workplace. Imagine you're giving someone tough feedback or telling a team that a major change is coming. You might be tempted to sugarcoat it or skip straight to the positives. But here's the truth. Your team already knows there's tension. They're already thinking things like, this is going to mean more work. They don't care about how this affects us. Instead of pretending those thoughts don't exist, say them yourself. Try something like, you're probably thinking this change feels sudden and unfair. You may feel like your concerns weren't heard in the decision. Now the conversation becomes real. You're not hiding from friction. You're facing it with clarity. So, what does Never Split the Difference really teach us? At its heart, this isn't just a book about negotiation tactics or winning arguments. It's a book about how to speak human in high-stakes moments. Chris Voss, a man who once negotiated with terrorists, shows us that the real breakthroughs don't come from being the loudest, the smartest, or the most aggressive. Negotiation isn't war. It's a dance, a mirror, a slow unfolding of truth. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What's one conversation you're now thinking about differently? And if you found this valuable, hit subscribe and stay with me as we keep unpacking ideas that sharpen your thinking and soften your edges, right here on Poetics of Success. Until next time, wishing you wealth, success, and above all, consistency.